Georgia Gang Investigators Association. I believe 2 years ago they had some blocks on music and gangs.
And have you had the occasion in your experience to investigate gangs with people who have ties to the music industry?
I have in Atlanta. It is very common.
And is YSL and YFN both of those gangs that you've been able to investigate?
Yes,
And have you listened to music of individuals associated with both those gangs, both YSL and YFN?
I have.
And are you familiar with gang references in music?
I am.
Your Honor, this time the state would like to tender Investigator Viverito as a witness, as an expert in criminal street gangs and criminal street gang activity, Your Honor.
All right. She's so qualified and may testify as an expert in those areas.
Now, while you've either been at Atlanta Police Department or the Fulton County District Attorney's Office, have you had the opportunity to lead any gang investigations?
I have.
And specifically, I want to direct your attention to this particular case, this indictment here, where you wanted to lead investigators on this indictment when you were at the Fulton County District Attorney's Office.
Yes, I was.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Mic check for the one in the chat.
As an investigator on this case, did you have the occasion to investigate any crimes involving an individual by the name of Marquavius Huey?
I did.
And specifically, did you investigate an armed robbery that occurred in October of 2020?
I did.
How did you get involved in that investigation?
Prior to coming to the DA's office, when I was at the GBI Gang Task Force, my office was at the Atlanta Police Department's headquarters in their gang unit. So I was very familiar with all the detectives and the different units up there. I was approached by a detective, Jeffrey Henderson, from the robbery unit regarding a robbery case involving Mr. Huey that he had.
And when he approached you, what if any steps did you assist him when he approached you?
I did.
What if steps did you take to assist him with that investigation?
Just identifying Mr. Huey's gang involvement, who he was affiliated with, who he would have had alliances with, who he would have had rivalries with, things of that nature.
And how did you go about assisting to identify Huey's relationships with any gang?
The thing I did was review Mr. Huey's social media accounts. The name has changed a few times, but when I reviewed it, it was Mr. Huey's very proud of his affiliation with Young Slime Life.
Yep.
So-
Sustained. Don't provide commentary like that, okay? Just if you're testifying to facts, just give us the facts. Disregard that last comment.
So just what were some of his names?
JBS Quay for Jonesboro South Quay. I can't remember the rest of them off the top of my head, but he would change. It changed a few times.
And when you looked at his social media, did you also do any other investigation to assist Investigator Henderson?
When Investigator Henderson, following Mr. Huey's arrest, obtained his cellular devices, Investigator Henderson did a search warrant for his devices with a scope of 30 days. So what that means is when the phone is extracted, it's permissible to review 30 days worth of data. I think the time frame was just around the time of the robbery. Within that time frame, there were additional crimes and evidence in the phone. I secured search warrants to expand the scope of what was allowed to be searched to the entire phone on 2 phones.
And once you were able to secure a search warrant, did you then look into the phone, the expanded phone?
I did.
And in preparation for your testimony today, have you had the opportunity to look at some of the contents in that phone?
I have.
You have permission to approach?
You may.
Commissioner,
You may.
thank you. I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 227 VV2A, 227 VV2B, 227 VV2C, and 227 VV2D. If you can look at those and tell me if you recognize those items.
Sure. Yes, I recognize them.
And how do you recognize them?
They are text messages that were extracted from Mr. Huey's phone, his phones, as well as two contacts that were stored in the phone.
And those appear to be accurate depictions of text messages and the context that were in the phone that you reviewed back in 2020.
They do.
Right. Your Honor, this time the state would like to admit State's Exhibit 227 VV2A, 227 VV2B, 227 VV2C, and 227 VV2D into evidence.
Admitted.
Now, Investigator Viverito, when looking through the phone, well, let me ask you this. Prior to getting involved with this investigation with Marquavius Huey, did you have any knowledge of any beef between YFN and YSL?
Yes, since 2015, YSL and YFN had an ongoing conflict.
Overruled.
And when you were working with the GBI task force in 2020, did you have knowledge of that beef?
I did.
Now, when you looked inside of Mr. Huey's phone, did you see any conversations in his phone regarding an individual by the name of Lucci?
I did.
Okay. And generally, what information was in the phone that you saw about an individual Lucci? What did you see at the phone?
I would see that when Lucci or Mr. Rayshawn Bennett, when Mr. Bennett would have, there was a handful of performances or appearances within the city of Atlanta. The flyer would be shared either by Mr. Williams or Mr. Huey, and Mr. Huey would talk about going to handle that, and would be told or asked to go handle that.
And you said he'd be talking to Mr. Williams. How did you know, when you're saying Mr. Williams, who are you referring to?
Jeffrey Williams, also known as Young Thug.
How did you know he was speaking with Jeffrey Williams?
Based on the phone numbers that he was in communication with, as well as how they were named in the phone, but the phone numbers themselves.
I'm going to first show you what's been admitted as 227 VV2C.
Okay.
And it should come up on your screen in a moment. Now, first, looking at 227 VV2C, what is the jury looking at?
You're looking at when you extract a phone. If you go to your address book in your phone, you'll pull up contacts or a contact card. This is what it looks like when the phone is extracted. When you receive it back on a hard drive and you're going through the phone, this is what it's going to appear as. So you may have mom, a phone number, and that information. This is how it appears in a forensic phone extraction.
And for 227 VV2C, do you see a name associated with this contact?
Yes.
And what is the name?
It's named Slime and it has some emojis with the name.
Okay. And are you able to tell what the emojis are?
It looks like a snake emoji And I don't know if you guys can see, it has, should be like the iPhone emoji.
And then in this phone, when it says deleted, do you know what that means?
I would assume that I don't see it on my copy where it says deleted.
Where it says deleted in the left-hand column?
Oh, okay, there you go. So yeah, that would be, I would assume that means that contact was deleted or removed from the device at some point, but still stored in the memory of the device somewhere.
And where it has other, what is in the other category?
That would be the number associated with that contact.
All right. And then for the created category, what's the created category?
That's going to be the date that the contact was added to the phone. So say you meet somebody, you add their contact to your phone, you put them in your address book, that's going to be that date.
And then if it was modified, what does that mean?
Modified could be you change their name, you add a last name, you delete the contact, or you modify the number in any way.
All right. And what was the phone number associated with this contact in the phone?
213-910-1192.
Now I'm going to also show you 227 VV2D.
Okay.
First, I want to start with the other. What is the phone number associated with this contact?
213-910-1192.
And is that the same phone number from 227 VV2C?
It is.
And when you look at the name, what is in the name section?
So here it's going to appear as almost like a bug type emoji, but I had a chance to review the physical device. It is a spider emoji. That's just how it translates to, I don't know if you have friends, if you have an iPhone, your friends, the Android, sometimes the emojis don't translate correctly. When you extract the phone, that's what happens here. So when you look at the physical device, it's going to be a spider.
And then what was the created and modified date on 227 VV2D?
March 1st of 2019 is created and modified November 22nd of 2020.
And through your investigation, did you associate this contact with an individual?
I did.
And who was that?
Jeffrey Williams.
All right. Now I'm going to publish 227 VV2A.
Okay.
And I want to go to slide 2. What's being depicted in slide 2? And if we can zoom in, because I know it's pretty tiny.
So just like in your phone, when you send a message, typically the message you're sending is going to be in green for iPhones, blue if they have the sent recipient has an iPhone. It's going to be on the right-hand side of the conversation. What that is going to be is it's a flyer for a YFN Lucci performance or appearance.
Okay. And who sent the flyer, and to whom did the flyer get sent to?
Mr. Huey sent that flyer to Mr. Williams.
And looking at slide 3, in the middle, what is in the middle? Is that this attachment of what the flyer is?
Yes.
Now looking at slide number 3, is that the attachment?
It is.
All right. And for the record, what does the attachment say?
It is a flyer. I think it was a performance or an appearance. It was a mixtape release for Mr. Bennett at the Diamond Club, which, from my experience with other investigations, is a YFN stronghold.
And if you need to, you can use the screen to help point out as well.
Yeah, so you'll see it's just saying he has a mixtape release, and this is at the Diamond Club on Northside Drive.
Now looking at slide 3, 4, excuse me. Starting at slide 4. And if you can either read from the screen behind you or from your paper, or read from the screen behind you, and so we can show the jury. Tell the jurors about the conversation that is happening as a result of this flyer.
So it's a little confusing, but at the time, if you look at the time and dates these messages are sent, the flyer and the initial conversation is started on Mr. Williams' phone that has a 213 area code or a Los Angeles area code. Once the flyer is sent by Mr. Huey, Mr. Williams switches to his Atlanta phone number and they engage in conversation to where Mr. Williams tells him, handle that tonight, and follows it up with slat. And then Mr. Huey responds, slat.
And you said that this was Mr. Williams' Atlanta number. On the left-hand side, it says slime. How the contact is saved in Mr. Huey's phone.
Yes, that's how it would appear in the phone.
And what is the Atlanta phone number?
It is 404-789-1371.
And what is the date, roughly the date and times of these text messages?
January 19th, 2020.
Now going to page 5. What is being depicted on slide 5 of this PowerPoint?
That is Mr. Williams using his Atlanta number to tell Mr. Huey on August 15th of 2020, go handle that, and he responds, slat.
Now, looking at page 6, or slide 6, excuse me. Now, this September 2nd, 2020.
It is.
Okay. And what is occurring in this text message conversation beginning on September 2nd, 2020?
Okay, so several months later, Mr. Huey is going to send another flyer for a YFN Lucci appearance or performance. And Mr. Williams responds, where's that at? Mr. Huey tells him, Claremont. Mr. Williams responds and says, slatty handle, stay very low. And Mr. Huey says, slat, for sure, I've been out the way.
And looking at the next slide, is this a copy of that flyer?
Yes, it is.
And when is the date of the appearance that Mr. Bennett is advertising?
September 6th.
Now going to the next slide. Does that conversation continue?
It does.
Okay. And if you could say for the record what the conversation is as it continues.
Mr. Huey tells Mr. Williams, I appreciate you for everything, my brother. Never about money with me. I'm built on loyalty. He sends the 100 emoji, which kind of means like, I'm for real about it. Mr. Williams says, slat, handle that, I got you. Mr. Huey responds, slat.
Now, going to the next slide, is there some additional conversation now with the 213 number that's identified as Spider or Mr. Williams?
There is.
Okay. And when is this conversation?
July 20th of 2020.
Okay. So this is after the first Lucci conversation, but before the second Lucci conversation.
Yes.
All right. And what is occurring in this conversation?
Mr. Huey sends in the first message, you see an attachment. It's a video clip of a friend that wanted really bad. He was like trying to get his career off the ground as a rapper here in Atlanta. He says, post this for me, my brother. And then he uses a derogatory term for somebody and says, that person's out here in LA, twin. Not referring to his friend, he's referring to somebody else, somebody of the opposition, it appears.
Sustained.
Yes. And is that just generally the context of this conversation?
Correct.
All right. I want to move to the next slide. I'm sorry, the next slide. Specifically, on this slide, do you see a message with an individual by the name of Javon Fleetwood?
I do.
And are you familiar with that individual?
I am.
And how are you familiar with that individual?
He's a member of YSL.
Okay. And as a part of your investigation, have you had the occasion to investigate a shooting involving Mr. Fleetwood, where he is been charged with aggravated assault?
Yeah, I wasn't the lead investigator, but I had a chance to review the investigation.
Okay. And did you have an opportunity to prep that case for trial at any point?
I did.
What were the charges that he was preparing for to go to trial on?
I believe it was aggravated assault.
Okay. And do you know the approximate date of the incident in which he was being charged with?
I believe it was May 10th of 2019.
And in that May 10th, 2019, was there a vehicle associated with that ag assault?
There was.
Well, we haven't heard it yet, but avoid hearsay.
Yes. As a part of your investigation, when you were investigating that case for trial,
Don't elicit hearsay,
I want to listen here say,
because right now it sounds like she's testifying as a fact witness, right?
yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Did you get social media account for Mr. Fleetwood
I didn't obtain records for it, but I reviewed some posts from his account.
from his public account?
Correct.
And have you had an opportunity to view those posts prior to your testimony today?
I have.
Permission to approach, Your Honor?
You may.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 479 VV. Tell me if you recognize 479 VV.
I do.
And how do you recognize 479 VV?
That's a photo of Mr. Javon Fleetwood from his Instagram account.
And is that from his public Instagram account?
It is.
Right. And was that pulled in preparation for this indictment here that we are referencing, 22 SC 183572?
It was.
Right. Your Honor, this time the state would like to tender and admit 478 VV into evidence.
Admitted.
Oh, excuse me, 479 VV.
All right. Admitted.
And we'll publish that in a moment. Based on your investigation, do you know if Mr. Huey and Mr. Fleetwood had a friendship?
Yes.
And had you seen any public social media accounts with both Mr. Fleetwood and Mr. Huey in those together?
I believe there were a few posts of them together that I reviewed.
Right. Now I want to go to, I think, slide 10. And we're going to now publish 469 VV. Four 471, 479 VV. That's not it. And is that Mr. Fleetwood?
That is
Okay. And what was his Instagram name?
_TV World.
And I want to zoom into his face. Do you see any tattoos? Do you see any tattoos on Mr. Fleetwood's face?
I do.
And specifically, do you see the tattoo with the star?
I do.
What is the tattoo next to the tattoo with the star?
So down
It
the
doesn't
right
reveal,
side
sir.
of his face by his temple, you'll see he has YSL tattooed on the right side of his face.
And now I'll go back to the next set of the former.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning.
States Exhibit 227 VV2A.
Viverito's pretty confident in her job, doesn't it appear?
Now I want to go to this conversation that starts on February 25th, 2020.
Okay.
Who is Mr. Huey speaking with?
Mr. Williams using his Los Angeles area code phone number.
And looking at this post, generally, what is the context of this text message conversation?
He sends a social media post of somebody else to Mr. Williams and says, "What's up with him? Is he cool?"
Okay. And then what was his next message to Mr. Williams' phone?
He's inquiring if the gentleman is cool. It looks because he says he posted that racial expletive Bloody J.
And are you familiar with that name or individual, Bloody J?
Yes.
And are you aware if he's associated with any gang?
Yes.
What gang is that?
He's associated with the YFN or Atlanta Blood Gang, criminal street gangs.
And do you know Bloody J's given name?
Yes, it's Justin Ushery.
And have you had any investigation involving Mr. Usher?
I have.
And then did Mr. Williams respond to his to Mr. Huey's inquiry?
He says, "Who is that?" To which Mr. Huey responds, "Duct Tape Dave."
And are you familiar with the individual by the name of Duct Tape Dave?
Yes.
How are you familiar with that name?
He's a pretty prominent guy within the Duct Tape criminal street gang.
And then was there a response to that?
It was.
Oh, and what was that?
Mr. Williams says, "He's a buster too." To which Mr. Huey responds, "Slap." And he tells Mr. Williams, "I told him, fuck them, racial expletive. He hit me back laughing and shit."
Now I want to go to a tweet that begins on March 12th, 2020.
Okay.
Now, what is going on within this group of text messages on March 12th, 2020?
Mr. Williams initiates a conversation with Mr. Huey.
Okay. And what does Mr. Williams say in his initiation?
What y'all got going on?
Okay. And then is there a response?
He says, "Them, racial expletive. No, I ain't play no part in that slime."
And then is there a response from Mr. Williams back to Mr. Huey?
He says, "Take that shit back."
And is there a response from Mr. Huey back to Mr. Williams?
Mr. Huey says, "I ain't get nothing out of that. I ain't even pulling no gun on nobody. I'm finna tell them though."
All right. And does does he make another response?
He said, I told him I ain't finna do that shit. He went on and did it. I couldn't stop him.
And then does Mr. Williams respond to that?
Mr. Williams says, if he don't take it back, he's gonna die.
And looking at this text message, without going into detail, were you aware of any police reports around this event of March 12, 2020?
Overruled.
Were you aware of any police reports regarding any incidents around this date?
I was.
Okay. Now, I want to go to 227 VV 2B. And in looking at 227 VV 2B, was there a text message on November 14, 2021?
There was.
Okay. And who sent the message?
Mr. Huey sends the message to Mr. Williams' LA area code phone number.
Okay. And what does the message say?
It says, you know, I'm ready to handle the business and go sit down if I got to about any one of y'all on my mama.
Now I'm going to approach, I'm going to show you what's been marked as 428 VV. Tell me if you recognize Stacey Dibbitt 428 VV.
I do.
And how do you recognize Stacey Dibbitt 428 VV?
This is a photo from Mr. Huey's public Instagram account.
And is that, what was his account name?
__ Quay1.
And were you familiar with that Instagram post for Mr. Huey?
I was.
And were you able to pull that Instagram post in preparation for this case here today?
I was.
You know, this time the state would like to tender tender 428 VV into evidence.
I'm sorry, 28,
428
Okay.
VV
admitted.
and permission to publish.
You may.
And who is depicted in this picture?
That's gonna be Mr. Huey standing with Mr. Williams.
And is there a caption?
There is.
What's the caption?
It reads, from lockdown to a jet, slat biz.
And is there a date to that post?
September 4th.
Now, in looking at Mr. Huey's phone, we talked about there being this ongoing beef with YFN since about 2015. And in Mr. Huey's phone, there is information about Mr. Huey going to go handle business and sending those flyers.
Correct?
Between 2019 and 2020, was there any ongoing conflict or continuous ongoing conflict between YFN and YSL?
Yes.
And through your investigation, were you made aware of incidents that occurred between 2019 and 2020 between those two groups?
Yes, several.
How did you learn about those incidents?
In 2019, when I was working, at that time, I wasn't yet promoted to the gang task force. So I was assigned to the Atlanta Police Department's gang unit as a probation officer with a gang caseload. So I worked on their investigations with them. And then in 2020, when I was with the GBI gang task force, I worked some of the actual investigations.
Specifically, did you ever work an investigation regarding a May 2019 incident involving YFN Lucio, Mr. Rayshawn Bennett?
I was aware of the incident, but I was not an investigator on it.
Okay. Did you investigate any shots fired call from May 22nd, 2019 in the Cleveland Avenue area?
Yes.
How were you involved in that investigation?
Can I refer to a timeline?
Yes.
That was an incident where shots fired at the YSL stronghold located at 151 Cleveland Ave.
Sounds like we're reading off the report, and I'm gonna ask you to.
Sustained.
Are you familiar with 151 Cleveland Avenue?
I am.
How are you familiar with 151 Cleveland Avenue?
That's a known location where YSL members hang out, sell narcotics, congregate.
And have you had your own opportunity to investigate crimes that occurred in that area of 151 Cleveland?
I have.
Now, I want to take you to 2020. Did you have the occasion to investigate any specific incidents involving YFN incidents towards YSL members or YSL members towards YFN members?
I did.
In 2020, how many such incidents did you yourself were part of the investigation?
There were numerous incidents that we worked on as a team.
And in 2020, were there a lot of back and forth shootings between those two groups or associates of those two groups?
Yes, almost daily.
In 2020, were there also social media posts of antagonizing between one group posting on social media, antagonizing the other group?
Yes.
Do you know of an individual by the name of Tinquarius Mender?
I do.
How do you know that individual? How are you aware of that individual?
I want to make sure I answer that. Is it okay to answer?
Let me ask you this. Is Mr. Mender associated with YSL?
He is.
Have you seen social media posts of Mr. Mender driving around in YFN territory?
Yes, he would post himself driving around and he would tag, in case you didn't recognize it from sight, he would tag Summerhill.
And why would that be considered antagonizing for Mr. Mender to be driving around in Summerhill?
Because Mr. Member was also a member of YSL.
In 2020, did you have the occasion to investigate a case involving Mr. Mender and Mr. Diamante Thomas at Greenbrier Mall?
Yes, but I think it was Dontavius.
Excuse me, Dontavius
Yeah.
Thomas. Are you aware if Dontavius Thomas is related to Donovan Thomas?
Yes,
How are they related?
I believe it's his brother.
How were you involved in the investigation regarding Mr. Mender and Dontavius Thomas?
At that time, like I said, there was a conflict. The conflict had reignited. So almost daily, every day we had incidents happening. I remember that day we were at work, we got a call about a vehicle that was fired upon while it was driving on the highway, and it had flipped over, had two victims inside the vehicle. Myself and investigator Storno of the Atlanta Police Department's gang unit began to look deeper into that case and realized that the victims on the case were Dontavius Thomas and Reginald Carter, the brother and cousin of Donovan Thomas.
And you said you began to dig deeper. What else did you do as a part of that investigation?
Once we got into the investigation, we located a suspect vehicle that I knew to be associated with Mr. Mender and his cousin, Wayne Alford.
And what else did you do as a part of the investigation?
We would pull phone records. We got video. We spoke to witnesses, and ultimately were able to charge that case appropriately.
Were there other conflicts that occurred in 2020?
Yes, following that case, I mean, it was, like I said, it was daily. It was constant shootings back and forth between the Summerhill neighborhood of Atlanta and some of the other areas where the YSL associates would hang out. It resulted in murders. It resulted in aggravated assaults. There were numerous incidents.
Now, in 2021, did you learn of the arrest of Rayshawn Bennett?
I did.
Okay. And when he was arrested, where was he housed?
At the Fulton County Jail.
And while he was in the Fulton County Jail, did you learn of a stabbing of Mr. Lucci in February of 2022?
I did.
How did you become aware of that incident?
I believe one of the investigators from the Fulton County Jail had mentioned it to me.
And once you learned about the incident, what, if anything, did you do?
Once I learned about the incident, I inquired about who the suspect was, and I found out that it was a Mr. Jaden Myrick.
When you found out it was Jaden Myrick, what did you do at that point?
I was familiar with Mr. Myrick, so I began to listen to his jail phone calls and look at his